My name is Jerry Lehman. I'm the CEO and founder of the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association. And back in here, this is just a representation of 8 years worth of tracks that I've produced myself offshore. I've spent 16 and a half years at sea in the last 23 fishing around the clock. This chart here is a replication of how we manage our fish stocks. This line right here represents the 42-degree, 20-minute line. The Gulf of Maine is everything that's above that line. This is considered to be Western Georges Bank region. This to the east is considered to be Eastern Georges Banks. That's how we split our fish stocks. So when we talk about allocation and how we split it and manage it here in our resources, those are the 3 regions we do it. These yellow lines representing curvature are examples from Portland, Maine, Gloucester, Mass, Boston, Mass, and New Bedford, Massachusetts. Those are radiuses outside of each and every major fishing port for 100 square miles. The reason I have overlapped those is now we're talking about remanaging our codfish structures, which is going to change the entire zone, which is going to be a big problem with floating offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine. Because of closure bottoms, we are going to end up funneling the entire fleet into Wilkerson's and Murray's basins, which is located just here east of the Caches closure. That's also an area where we have 3 choke species. So what will happen in the commercial fleet is we will chew up allocation historically faster than we've ever had, which will force vessels outside further deeper offshore waters, which will end up booting us all into Area 522. So not only will these fishing fleets have to cross through floating offshore wind farms to access allocation outside of it, it'll put their lives in danger too. Specifically here in New England, we have variable weather conditions. And I contest, I've seen 35-foot seas. It does happen. It's not very fun. It's like being on a roller coaster you can't get off of. And all you do is hold on and hope for the best. So tonight we're going to talk about offshore wind. This is just a replica picture of floating windmills with a substation. Now, this is just an underwater view. Now, this radius is supposed to be where their watch circle is for a floating turbine, because we're going to have to anchor these systems. Average depth out there, primarily where they're looking to put these sites, is about 700 feet of water. And if you look at the appendixes on this building out, the anchoring systems are talking 7-to-1 and 9-to-1 scope. So what that means, if it's 700 feet of water, at 7-to-1 scope, that's 4,900 feet per piece of the anchoring system. So that would just be one part of 3. So if we're talking on average, we're talking close to 15,000 feet of chain per turbine. And we're talking about putting initially about 1,300 turbines out there right now in phase 1. Phase 1 is just the first initial 1 million acre sell-off in a 2 million acre area, which will be covering better than 20% of the fishing bottom that the commercial offshore fleet uses. And right now, they're offering the bid at $50 per acre. Now they're also offering bidding credits as well, saying that 12.5% go to onshore, offshore infrastructure, and 12.5% goes to fisheries compensation. I gave them the quick math. I go, it's a 33-year lease altogether. I go, so let's just say I go in and I purchase the entire million acres at $100. So that's $100 million. 25%, $25 million, $12.5 million to onshore, offshore infrastructure, $12.5 million to fisheries compensation. Well, here's a problem. I go, 12.5 million divided by 33 is $378,787.87. Last year alone, the trawling fleet alone stocked $40 million. So now you're taking up over 20% of our commercial fishing grounds. I go, and the compensation on the initial bid was less than 1% of just what one fishery in this area does, which is going to have a direct impact to the viability of keeping a hard, healthy product on the American dinner table. Kennedy was talking to the Secretary of Department of Commerce about a month ago. 94% of the seafood consumed in the United States is now foreign product. And out of that 94%, 1% gets checked that comes imported. And 1/3 of that 1% fails to meet USDA standards. It wouldn't be alarming Last year, we had well over 9 billion pounds imported. In a country of 335 million Americans, you want to take a guess how many of us are microdosing eating seafood? Now the food securities are going to be a real issue, and the viability of the long-term sustainability of our fish stocks, which belongs to every U.S. citizen. That's something a lot of people forget. This is just a fisherman's fight. No, it isn't. This is a fight for every American dinner table. Because now the longevity of your kids and your grandkids and the food securities and the health of that food is now in jeopardy. And that's something that we take. We take pride in the fisheries knowing what we produce. Something that didn't have to be chemically induced. We didn't have to plant it. It's a naturally sustaining resource. And now we're going to be putting that into jeopardy. And that's something that we just can't stand by and watch out. And again, I figured it out the other day just in a rough calculation. If I was to take all the anchoring chain that they want to produce for the floating turbines, we could take the anchoring chain end for end, go from Portland, Maine to Miami 3 times, and still have enough slack to get to Key West as well. That's a lot of chain. That's the size of the chain. You're talking of 1 foot, 8 inches across. You're talking 6-inch chain, 3 feet long. And right beside it is also a human standing there at roughly 6 feet. This will also score the ocean floor as well. So as these 20-foot seas, these massive upwellings and downwellings, this station is going to move, creating sediment plumes on the ocean floor, choking out the stocks, destroying benthic habitat. This is where the fundamentals of the life in our ocean start. Most of the juveniles will start as eggs on the ocean floor. Once they hatch, they make their way to the top 5-6 meters of the water column. That's when they take a ride in the Gulf of Maine gyre, which is a counterclockwise spinning cycle. All of the cold water nutrients stem from the Bay of Fundy, which run all the way down our coast, from the Bay of Fundy entrance all the way down to Nantucket, where it hits the Area 1 shelf, goes back up the edge of George's Banks, and makes the counterclockwise spiral. So no matter where we end up developing, eventually what comes around goes around in our system. That's why we're a unique body of water like any other in the world. This has been scientifically proven. So taking examples from other nations and trying to say that these same examples are going to work here, it's just not true. It's like a thumbprint. It's only unique to each area for which you're looking. This is just an example of the floating technology daisy chaining. It's kind of a little hard to see, but these are going to be interconnected turbines using AC cables that'll be draped through the mid-water column. And that's another problem we're going to have, because AC cables emit EMF and heat. So as we leave, let's just say they're 12 megawatt turbines. You're going to have an EMF field coming off of that turbine, and when it hits the second turbine, the field will grow and the heat will grow. And every time it hits the next turbine, it'll expand again until it goes to a hub where it'll be fed into a substation. And because of the distance from shore, most likely end up requiring cooling stations. This is just one concept of an HDVC converter, which is what merely all it is just converting AC power to DC for the transfers of the line loss back to shore. This is just one example for 1.2 million homes. Well, the state of Maine, just in the 3 gigawatts, promulgating 5 million homes. So that would already be 4 cooling stations, just for what the state of Maine is asking for alone. And to get the cables from this station back to shore, they'll be hydro dredging, burying that cable, creating large sediment plumes that do affect the mortality and the sustainability. These mud clouds are the perfect example of choking out species, driving them from your regions. They already are well aware, if you look at the cable variant coming into Barnstable and down that way, in the COP report, it already states that it's going to be a 2-year destruction process on top of a 2-year rebuilding process. The majority of the failure rates come in the cables. So the idea that they're only going to wipe out the area for 2 years in a 2-year rebuilding process, well, the likelihood of them having to redo this over and over again is quite up there. This is just another example from one of the research reports. Now, a cooling station is a 27 square foot opening, 30 feet from the ocean floor, pulling in ambient 45-degree water, discharging it chlorinated and heated at 86 to 90 degrees, 40 feet from the ocean surface. with 100% mortality to ethioplankton, zooplankton, and copepods. These are the building blocks of our ocean. Once we lose that sustainability, it will be a major issue. This is just another copy of the same report coming out of Sunrise Wind Appendix N2. And right there I highlighted the best part of it all, the 100% mortality. This is open admittance that they're willing to destroy the natural resources and the sustainability of our food securities here in this nation, making us more dependent upon foreign food. This is just another replica of another substation. This is one of the answers we keep asking ourselves. Well, how many substations are going to use? Well, right now the Sunrise Wind Project says it's only good for 1,034 megawatts. Well, they're asking for 15 gigawatts in the Gulf of Maine. That's an easy 15 substations pumping 8.1 million gallons apiece per day, dead water back heated into our ocean. And again, that upwelling and downwelling with that discharge will greatly affect our other plankton life. It also affects the forage fish and the sustainability of our groundfish stocks. Because everything starts at an egg status when it works its way to the gyre, and now the risk of backing them up and the sustainability of these areas are going to be directly impacted. Another part is wherever offshore wind seems to go, barnacles, blue mussels, and sea squirts seem to follow along with these massive productions. Now what happens when we start putting blue mussels and building platforms offshore to grow these bivalves? Now these bivalves are eating zooplankton and phytoplanktons in an area where they were never designed to be. Naturally, I've been offshore for over 20 years. I've never seen a blue mussel east of 70 degrees. They don't live there. Naturally, they don't belong there. But now we're going to be building substations and offshore wind platforms to grow these things, which will have another direct effect against the zooplankton and phytoplankton levels. Not to mention the EMF fields that come off of these things will also have already been shown at a United Kingdom study to have effect against lobster larvae. Not only will the EMF mature lobsters faster through the heat, but the survivability of the lobster's eggs, once it matures faster than normal, also decreases, which is again going against the natural sustainability of just the lobster fisheries alone. And there's another report showing when larval levels of haddock come across EMF fields that 60% of the school slows down, which could put them into higher predation. Olive branches, sharks, skates, and rays are attracted by electromagnetic fields. So predation will be highly going on in these areas. Now, there's also another report, which if you take one of the cards when you guys leave tonight, we'll have QR codes going to our in-house reports, which I do tell everybody to take a look at. These are the only researchers so far around the world with these kind of effects. We have very little knowledge on these things, and yet we're moving faster than science will allow. This is some of the questions that the fisheries ask. It's like, there's not a fisherman alive that doesn't want to go green, but are we going green just for the sake of saying we are, or are we actually doing it? Because so far, out of all the digging we've done for over a year and a half, we have yet to find any positive feedback in any of this, and for the survivability and the sustainability for our economy and our fisheries alone. This is just another picture of the lobster. And again, like I said, lobsters can survive in warmer water. They just mature faster. And the problem is with maturing faster is the survivability of their eggs. That eggs is what replenishes that abundance that keeps it sustainable. And that's exactly why here in the United States, specifically in my state of Maine, that's the third largest industry we have in our state. It's well over $1 billion a year. And if you look at the United Kingdom, a study came out the other day that said 57% of the fisheries that are still surviving today are negatively being impacted on their resources. What happens when you take 570 million out of an economy? The trickle-down economics will affect us all, and this is from port to port all the way down along our coast. This is just another picture of a codfish larvae. Again, I just showed you that the cooling stations call for 100% mortality. So what happens when we go to the sustainability? We could be killing our resources for the sake of saying we're saving them. We do not know. We've not done proper enough studies. The Bigelow vessel is the research vessel coming from the Woods Hole Institute, nowhere in NIMS. During COVID, we did no research. And in the fall of 22, we only did an 82% completion in all the stations. Well, there are supposed to be 370 tows starting in Virginia all the way to the Bay of Fundy. And that 4220 line that I showed you on the first slide, well, above that line, they only accounted for 42 tows. Those were only at 1 nautical mile apiece. Well, that's 42 nautical miles checked in a 36,000 square mile area. We literally looked at 1/12 of 1%. And then we did a massive reduction in Gulf of Maine haddock by 82%, and that's due to policy. Policy in the fisheries dictates the greater the unknown, the greater the restriction for the conservation. That's why we reduced Gulf of Maine haddock by 82%. Not that there wasn't any fish, but since we had such limited data, we had to take the most restrictive measure. And now the fisheries are paying for it, and you, the US consumer, are paying for it. These are the larvae that end up producing this massive amount of wild protein. This is the best protein we could ever ask for any of our families. It's natural, it's not chemically treated, and it's naturally sustaining when properly managed. And now we're going to have direct impacts to those. And that's something that there's so very few fishermen left, especially blue water fishermen. I mean, I'm 42 years old. I've been a skipper for well over 20 years. My average competition is 20 years older than I am. We are in an open admittance between the lobstering industry and the groundfish industry. We have an aging of the fleet. We have nobody to replace them with. We teach fisheries management at the college level. We do not teach fisheries. So this environmentally friendly, the sustainable methods, and the tracking and the migration is not taught in any school. It's just not. The only way that fishermen learn is learning from the fishermen that came before them. And now with so very few of us left, it just drives us to the demand for foreign product. And that's something that anybody here in the United States shouldn't want. These are the same products that are not managed equally like we do here in the United States. We're the most policy-regulated fishery in the world, but yet we purchase product from other nations who do not abide by our rules and regulations. They do not have sustainably fished methods. They just haven't. And not to mention they're chemically treated and processed outside of USDA standards, and they're shipped in here. And during COVID, we upticked that by an additional 60%. The final slide will show you a better presentation of that. This is another wind turbine effect on the hydrodynamics. This was something else that was brought up, and it's been scientifically known, of upwelling and downwelling of our ocean currents. Again, that red area on the top, we'll just say that simulates the top 5-6 meters of our water column. Now, because of the upwelling and downwelling from offshore turbines, that larval is now mixing, creating predation, and this is something that goes out of the natural order. Which leads me up to, why do fishermen not like offshore wind sites? Well, radar interference is going to be a big one. Again, where these things are sited, we will be funneling a fleet into Wilkinson's and Murray's Basin. We have 3 choke species in that location: Gulf of Maine haddock, codfish, and white hake. Once that allocation is burned up, the fleet will have no choice but to transit through offshore wind sites. So you're asking all blue water vessels, in order to access area to keep their businesses viable, will have a 2-mile transit lane to go through an offshore wind farm, where that is a picture of your general radar. Now imagine going through there at night in a 20-foot sea, because you know a storm's coming, and you know there's probably 20 other vessels on Georgia's banks having to make the same corridor run at the same time. This is a picture right here. On the other side of that wave is a 98-foot vessel. This is some of the concerns that I have been initiating, talking with the National Marine Fisheries and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Now imagine when I turn the lights off, not only do 98-foot vessels disappear, but with radar interference, that's the technology we rely on to safely maneuver our way home. And now you will literally be running in the dark. Now, if you're in the wheelhouse of that boat, that's your picture. That's what you can see. I don't care how bright your light is on that turbine, because you're not going to see it. you are only seeing a wall of water. So your electronics that's your life force. Once you lose that, you are literally running in the blind. And that's the same photo from the other side. These are 98-foot vessels, 20-foot seas. This is an average thing in the Gulf of Maine in the wintertime. I have run from George's Banks on the northern edge back to land more times than I can count. And I can tell you for 6 months out of the year, it's a roller coaster out there. You got freezing spray, all kinds of weather conditions. Microbursts are a real thing. Now, when we talk about transiting, it's already hard enough to see anything on a good day, and you're on an open ocean. And now when you start putting turbines and fixtures in there isn't going to be, people are going to be in danger. It's not even a question. We know this, they're going to be in danger. They were already in danger on a good day. This just magnifies that quite exponentially. Now, about a month ago, I was in Rhode Island, and the ICES met, which was a convention of scientists from around the world with floating technology and fixed technology turbines. United Kingdom, Spain, Norway, Germany was even there. CFAS and NOAA put this on with Sea Grant, Rhode Island. Now, the funny one is I was asked last minute to come to this conference. Now, this is part of their presentation slides, and I thought it was quite interesting finding people that are 20 to 30 years ahead of us in offshore wind technology. This was the possible consequences to the fishery. Displacements of species from spawning and nursery grounds, reduced reproduction and survival, trophic changes, consequences to stocks, the displacements of the surveys. We can't accurately account for what we have in our water anymore. Now we have to find different methodologies to track everything. And the problem is we don't have a long enough time series to even have an epiphany using these other methods. And the displacement of the stocks, that was something that resounded through every presenter. They know we're going to change the dynamics of our ocean, but to how far, we have no idea. We could wipe out the sustainability of the natural resources, which is the food security for this nation. I can't imagine next time you come to New England and you ask for a fish sandwich, you're getting a haddock from Norway or a lobster from Canada. But that's what will happen. We don't know. We don't have enough time to find out, and we're pushing this ahead of the science, and even the International Convention of the Science Teams all agreed. This was part of their takeaway summary. This was Dr. Joseph Loret. He is the marine biologist, senior researcher for Spain. This next slide was his presentation. The take-home message, not so fast. That's not good. Somebody 20 years ahead of us with 5 offshore floating turbines is already openly admitting that we shouldn't be moving so fast for development. These are science teams that were way ahead of us already, and the fact that they're all resoundingly saying the same thing, slow down. My favorite part of it was here highlighted in blue. Feeling the pressure. Our job as scientists is to question, but not all questions are welcome. Some of us have received nasty criticism from lobbies, businesses, politicians for our concerns and our results related to offshore wind farms. Now, those are the head science teams from the United Kingdom, Spain, Norway. These are the same folks that are already ahead of us in offshore wind. Now, why would science teams from around the world that are already advanced ahead of us, that we're told that we're replicating in the process, to slow down and to halt? But we're moving ahead anyways. And that's something that people need to understand. We need time to do due diligent process. Again, there's not a fisherman alive that doesn't want to be green. Why wouldn't a fisherman not want to be green? The natural sustainability of our stocks is what makes our viable businesses, and that's why 5th generation fishermen like me are here. And these are the same reasons why the next generation of fishermen could possibly lose all opportunities that were given to our forefathers and the sustainability of your country's food securities. Now, this is just a U.S. seafood import. There's a $20.3 billion deficit just in the seafood here in the United States. I mean, if you look at this graph, the red line would show you the exports coming from the United States. And if you noticed, it's almost a horizon line. For 20 years, we've restricted the fisheries. Less and less fishermen every year. We have nobody to replenish the ranks. We have moved the goalposts so far, we can't even allow new access. An average trawler right now, to build a 90-footer, to get it back up to new standards like the European Union, it's $7 million. You would need an additional $2 million just in permitting, and that still doesn't guarantee you that you don't have to purchase quota to keep that business viable. Now, at our rate of interest, you would never be able to afford it. And now that just drives us even farther and harder into the hands of foreign product. And this is the same product that is destroying the economy along your seaboard. These fish that we bring in, not only is it a food security, but it's a health. The health of the wild protein is hands down, you can't beat it. It's wild, it's cold water nutrients. That's what provides heart healthy, considered to be brain food. This is something that's going to be in jeopardy. And now you're going to be playing Russian roulette every time you take a bite in your restaurants and your local places eating foreign product. And the answer is we don't even check. And that's something that we really need to be concerned about. Now, when it comes to floating offshore wind, not even the council was taking into the effect of driving the entire fleet into choke stock areas. Wasn't even brought up. All of the councils between the Mid-Atlantic and the New England Council, the New England Council doesn't even have a fisherman on the staff anymore. There's no fishermen on the council. A New England Fisheries Council with no fishermen. So how would you know that a policy or a regulation was going to directly affect the economy in any one of our ports? You just wouldn't. You don't know. We don't teach it. We teach fisheries management again, but we don't teach fishing. So when we start setting these sites up, we are literally driving our offshore fleet into more dangerous waters. And those dangerous waters are going to have a direct effect on every single one of your dinner tables for the long term, and your children's to come. The next part of this presentation is going to be George Stover.
Hey, for Jerry. I'm George Stover. I was probably over 40 years running power plants, big utility, combined cycle, burned oil, coal, everything but coal. Started in nuclear engineering, and in the meantime, my grandfather taught me how to lobster fish, and I got salt in my veins, and so all of us in the industry are going, this is utterly crazy. This is all crazy. So what I'm going to talk about here is how electricity is made. I'm going to go through this pretty quick. It's a little bit, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, but it gets a little intense. And then what I did for a little bit, I worked for a company called Calpine out of California, running advanced combined cycle plants. And I'll tell you how we sold power and bought and sold gas for our plants. And then I'm going to run into a little bit of offshore wind. So I'll go pretty quick to the first part of this. This is pretty simple, right? You make power, you step it up on a transformer, goes out on transmission. Transmission can be interstate, locally within your state, or state to state, or out of the country. You drop it down again to distribution, and drop it down again into your homes and businesses. That's basically how it works, right? So it doesn't matter what this is, wind, coal, it's all done the same thing. But what does matter is that electricity cannot be stored. I'm going to show you a demand curve in a minute, and basically for ISO New England, and that over a 24-hour period, how much that changes. So what I'm really going to beat down here is that wind and solar are variables, and we have a very tight demand curve that needs to be fed just what it needs to be fed at the time. So you could store electricity, store it, pump storage. There's a massive pump storage down here in Massachusetts. So some batteries. Maine has a few batteries up there, about 46 megawatts. And there's some capacitor banks which help out. So really storage isn't there yet. Batteries are basically a 4-hour option. But here's a demand curve. This was taken, I was running this presentation on, this is back, I did the other day, but it's from June 10 years ago, but this doesn't change. Over 24 hours, around 3 a.m., it's really dead out there, right? There's not a lot of demand for power. By the time us fishermen get up around 4, 5, 6, you start putting the coffee pot on, we all do it at the same time, it has this big effect. So on a hot day, so everything is your actual demand and your forecast. ISO New England does a forecast every single day. This is what they do. And then I'll go in on how we buy and sell power. This is an actual demand curve for ISO New England. Sorry, it's back to 2010, but it doesn't really change. You do this every day. And what you'll see at night, all of a sudden everything's shutting down. We need less and less power. Well, what happens here with wind, and I'll get into that in a little more detail, is that wind only produces power when the wind's blowing. And that could be very inconvenient at 3 o'clock in the morning. But if they're bid into the ISO New England and they're accepted, and the wind is blowing 25, 30 miles an hour, you're going to get full wind production when you don't need it. They still get paid. We're still going to pay them for that power. Doesn't that hurt? This has happened in Europe every single day. So I showed you a demand curve for the shoulder months, which is very tame. Here we are in the summer. So what we have is base loaded units, and I'll go over that in a second. Those are units that run 24/7. That's your big coal plants, your big nuclear plants. They're very slow moving dinosaurs. They move 1 or 2 megawatts a minute. Then you have your intermediate load. Sorry, that's a little, you can see it better there. Intermediate load, which is the units that start up and shut down every day, like your combined cycle, some of your oil plants, and now a little bit of the coal plants. And then your peakers that will come on when there's an emergency. Say we lose 1,000 megawatts of power, one big nuke plant, 1,000, 1,200 megawatts drops off for whatever reason. That has to be replaced instantaneously. So that's where your peaking power, where your batteries, where your standby units are going to come on. But in the summer, you're already online. You're online 24/7, and the ISO is calling us all up and saying, don't touch a thing, don't do any maintenance, hang on, because if anything drops out, it's going to be bad for New England. In the wintertime, it's even worse, because all the natural gas, which is 46 to 50% of your load in New England, is gas generated. So your gas is taken up in heating houses. In the wintertime, they have priority. So in the wintertime, if there's an emergency, and I've been sitting there in a gas-fired power plant, 600 megawatts, and not get picked up because the price of power was too low, or the gas was too high, and I bid in, and I'll go over that in a minute. But if you have an emergency and you need extra power in the wintertime, you're in a lot of trouble. This is where, and I'll go over the wind effect here later on in the presentation, but if the wind is variable, 15 to 20 miles an hour, and it's going from 15 to full load, you have to have something that's chasing that load 100% opposite. Well, if we're already engaged during the summer and the winter, we're in trouble. We can't have a lot of variable power running in this system. That's why all of us that are from the power generation world are going, you want to do what? You want 32,000 megawatts of wind? Wind is, capacity is the average output of a unit over 12 months, right? So wind is basically about 34% capacity factor. And you take out the parasitic load, which is heating the blaze or anything like that in the wintertime, that's another 6 to 8% off that 34%. So these are very inefficient units, and they're variable, which upsets the whole grid. So if you're not invested in a generator, I think I'd go get one. Generation sources by rates. Wind and solar, like I already said, are base loaded variable. Nuclear, these are our backbone. This is our base load units. These are our steady rocket Gibraltars. We need these here. Oil-fired units is a big one up in New England. I ran up in Wyman Station. They move 4 to 5 megawatts a minute. They're base and intermediate load. They're really not capable of chasing wind. Here's your wind chasers. These are Ferraris of the generation world. These are combined cycle gas turbines. Whatever you want, GE, Siemens, Westinghouse units, they're all the same, and peaking units. Peaking units, basically you go from 0 to full load, you go and press the button, and whatever comes online, because you lose 1,000 megawatt unit, you got to replace that today. Your voltage drops, you get brownouts, you get all kinds of problems. You could trip offline. The whole grid could go down. Now you want to put 32,000 megawatts of variable wind in the wintertime. Doesn't make sense to me. And even batteries today, battery technology today is 4 to 6 hours. That's it. So to go for an average nor'easter, you're going to look at what, 3 days? 2.5, 3 days? We've all been through them, we lived through them. The wind is too high for, the wind velocity is too high for wind. You have no solar. Batteries are for 4 hours. How many banks of 100% backup of batteries you're going to need to replace the wind? Do the math. It's like 90,000 megawatts. Can you afford that? I know I can. Okay, transmission. I'll go through this a little quick, but transmission, 345 is a 6-lane highway running state to state, out of the country, through up into Canada. We're all connected, okay? 345, the higher the voltage, the less line loss. So that's why we want to go with the high voltage stuff, right? And power runs from high to low. It's the interstate highway, and it links Canada, New Brunswick, all of New England, all of the United States together, really, 345. There's higher voltages, but I won't go there. Electricity flows from high to low. What scares me by putting 30,000 megawatts off the Cape is that that's at a higher voltage. You're right now, you're at the lowest voltage. I'm going to jump there in just a minute. But remember that point. 115 is like US Route 1. That's your state delivery system. And power's still going 345, 115, and it drops down to distribution within your house or your business. I call that like secondary roads. It's like I get lost out here in the Cape. It's like your roads go everywhere. But that's the power lines are doing, right? So this carries to all your towns. Interesting enough, this is where your solar ties in, on the low end. So you get enough solar, you got a big imbalance too. I'm not going to get into a lot of that tonight. But electricity, how electricity is sold into the grid. I did a lot of this for about 1.5 years. So every day we bid into the ISO in 1-hour blocks. 24 hours. At midnight, I'm going to give you nothing. I don't want to come online till 6. At 6 o'clock, I'll give you 200 megawatts. So on, so on, so on. And here's the price. I bid in. This is what we do. Everybody that generates does that. Now, wind is subsidized. You heard of power purchase agreements? I don't know if you ever had them down here before, but we did in Maine up in 2000. It was the biggest disaster of your life. We brought in, the world was coming to an end in 2000. Manhattan's going to be under 9 feet of water. I remember all the hype was at the time. But at the end of the day, you have to have 24-hour blocks of regular power awarded each day. So at the end of each hour, there's an average of what that costs, and that's what we get paid. So wind is subsidized. Wind is going to come in at 0. If I'm a wind generator, I want to bid in at 0. I want to run 24/7. Because if the wind is up at midnight, I want to make money at midnight. I don't care, right? So they're subsidized through a power purchase agreement. What is the average down there now? Around 100. New York's, the 2 in New York came in at $150 a megawatt hour and $155 a megawatt hour. The average rate in New England is around $30. So we're already paying the wind $150 a megawatt hour. They're bidding in at 0 and running as much as they can with a variable load. This is a disaster. This is a disaster in the making. How it's sold into the grid. Independent, the ISO New England has done a very good job of trying to stay neutral in all of this. They're losing the battle, okay? It's an independent system operator which came in with deregulation. Deregulation was all the utilities sold all their generating units. It's like at my age, I paid my house off, so I don't have that mortgage every month, right? So if I'm a power company guy and I build a brand new plant, in 30 years that's paid off, so the price of power stays reasonable. So deregulation was, the whole hype was, well, all you that generate electricity are going to compete with each other and try to drive the price down. Well, we ain't stupid. We're gonna fix the bottom in there somewhere, right? And in combined cycle, it's around $10 to $15 a megawatt hour. So that was the premise that they did it. The minute they did it up in New England, up in Maine, they immediately started monkeying around with power purchase agreements. They built trash plants and they built wood burners because that's what was shovel ready at the time. They based it on $100 worth, $100 megawatts based on the price of oil projection. Well, in comes natural gas, early 2000s, right? Price of power went to what, $3, $10? Coal could not compete. And my last slide I'll show you today, the effects of that. We've done a good job of cutting the pollution out of New England. A very good job. We've cut it down by over 35%. So the system operators does a good job here. We really want the low-cost provider to come on as the demand curves needed. And the most expensive unit will shut down, will come on last and shut down first. So that keeps your costs down. But we've got subsidized power now with wind and solar, and it's based on $100 to $150 a megawatt hour. They don't care when they deliver it. They're gonna bid it in every hour for 24 hours, and at the end of the day, they get a check. And if at 3 in the morning they're producing too much power, they get paid anyways. They're told to come offline, and because they were picked up, y'all gotta pay for that. That happens in Europe all the time. Millions and millions of dollars. So capacity payments, there's other ways for them to make power. Capacity payments, I'll go quick. Spinning reserve, which is basically I'm idling in case a big unit goes down, I can come up and replace it real quick. We do that a lot with combined cycle. And the system must have enough spinning reserve to replace the largest unit that's online. So if that's a 1,000 megawatt unit, I got 1,000 megawatts that we're all paying for as spinning reserve in case that unit crashes. We can quickly come up and replace that. Make sense? Don't lie to me now, come on. Automatic generator control is the same thing as I just bring my unit up to a certain megawatt. It's like going down the highway, the interstate highway, I'm at 75, I put it in cruise control. I give the keys to the ISO New England and they run my unit. They pay me to do that. They have parameters how fast they can go and how much energy they can use. So these are all ways we make money. But here's what you want to pay attention to, is the node. This is fairly recent, I say recent, in the last 10 years of my career. So it's how far away you are from the node, right? So distance to load, the closer you are, more money. And generators online receive an hourly closing price regardless of their bid. So what I mean there is, if I come on at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm given $10 a megawatt hour, Jerry comes on at 6:30, he's bidding at $15 a megawatt hour, and you guys come in, you know, 15, 20, 25, 30, price keeps jumping up depending on the source. So at the end of every hour, the most expensive unit is what everybody gets paid. That's how they make it fair. Does that make sense? So as we all come on and the price comes up, as the price comes up, say there's a incident where we lose a 1,000 megawatt unit, that price will jump to $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a megawatt hour. That's like $1 million a day for me when I'm running a power plant. That happens quite often. So you got to replace that power. You got to keep that demand curve steady. That's based on voltage and how much power is needed. And now I'm going to go to the offshore wind and the floaters here, and I'm going to show you what is there, 8 leases now that they want to try to bring in floaters. And right now most of the action is down here off the Cape, and they're trying to get into the Cape, into the closest 345 switch yard, so they can put it across any state. It goes anywhere, right? And then power goes from high to low. So you'll see Connecticut down this way. You'll see some are higher because there's transmission restraints to get power in and out of the states. So different states have different issues. You'll see Canadian tie, and I'll apologize, that's not real clear, is $2 off the price. So if I'm building a new project, I'm acutely aware of where I can make the most money. And that's really right here. I want to be in this area. I want to destroy the Cape, which is just God's gift, and bring power into, and you'll see it at Dowses Beach area. They're going right to a 345 switch yard. I'm going to show you that in a minute. I was shocked when I saw this. Offshore wind power generation, it's variable. We talked about that. Jerry talked about this. It's really, the fixed is 5 times the cost of what it is. So that's basically 5 times 30, $150 megawatt hour. That's right on the money. And floating is at least 2x that. But that's only one leg of the stool, people. That's only one leg. I'm gonna build offshore wind, 30,000 megawatts. This is only round one. So if you're ready to fight, this is gonna keep going for a long time. They're not done yet. Europe is still adding. This is what scares me. This is round one. So if I'm gonna put in all this wind, and then this wind has a high cost for maintenance. Operation maintenance of wind is $115 per kilowatt hour, or $115,000 per megawatt hour, times 1,000 megawatt unit. Very expensive, right? What are we doing? I mean, and that's all subsidized by your power purchase agreement. I've added a little bit here on this talk about the export cables, the inter-array cables, and Jerry touched on a little bit of the installation, but I'll go a little bit deeper on temperatures. And so cabling, we've all seen this. These run from 5-inch up to 24 inches. The 3-phase AC cables. The smaller one is the inter-array cable connecting, like Jerry said, daisy chaining together. I was amazed to see that they were going into the beaches. This is not going into a power plant. I thought at first wind would go into power plants, but any public access, that's a public beach, that's a public right-of-way. If they can get into a public right-of-way, they're gonna bring them ashore there. They're looking for the closest point to a 345 switchyard. They will not tell you any information. I read the whole operation and maintenance installation of this whole project, and it was like a garbage data dump. They didn't give me any information. I didn't know the voltages, cable sizes, manufacturing, nothing of any value. So there was one set of books that they sent out to the consumer, and one set of books that they sent in to get their application approved. That should not even be legal. Same thing in the Gulf of Maine. I'm reading the same. So what I'm worried about here, there's miles and miles and miles of cable that's running around 90 degrees, 194 degrees, 180 degrees is what the cable max is, 194 max. So in this one installation, there's 5 cables. Each cable can only take 400 megawatts. There's 5 cables at least $5 million a mile to install it. They can't, I thought first that there's 2 projects here. There's a 1,200 and an 800 megawatt project. So the 800 has 2 cables, the 1,200 has 3. There's 5 cables going ashore, and it's hitting Craigspille Beach and Dowson's Beach. I stood on that beach with Jerry. I could not believe this.
Yeah.
But this is high voltage transmission. Have you seen out where they're clearing the new lines on the transmission? This is the same thing that's going to happen on the ocean floor. They're cutting trees, they're bulldozing it flat, right? What do you think they're going to do here? They're going to make this, that whole Cox's Ledge is being destroyed. It's being bulldozed flat. The whole transmission corridor is being bulldozed flat. They're going to run 5 cables. So here's where we are today. We've fought them back to 8 leases. Where do you think the cables are going to go? You got to guess. If I'm going to fill in for a environmental impact statement and make a statement about it, I don't have any information really to talk about it intelligently, right? This is one picture was taken from Green Ocean because I really struggled to find anything at all that showed the plume. They're going to do this around the clock. They move like 500 to 600 feet a minute, an hour, laying cable. It's going to be 6 feet wide. Just to dumb it down from my own side, that's 542 13-yard dump trucks per mile. That's the sediment they're taking out. You know what the guy said to me at the meeting? Well, it just drops in behind you. It's just going to fill in. Well, I'm calling bullshit on that one. Come on, people. It's going to bury everything in the way. They're going to plow everything out of the way. And there's this simple depiction of the plow coming along. Some of these, like Jerry showed you, are 60 feet wide. And they really don't care about having this thing covered over because these cables run hot, right? I already told you, they run 180 degrees. So you've got all these cables running 180 degrees for the export cable, and the inter-array cables, when it finally gets to the last wind turbine, is increasing about 36 degrees. You're putting radiant heat in the ocean floor, and we're worried about a warming ocean. Does that make any sense to anybody in this room? Submarine cable installation, jetting, this is just a travesty. Same thing, it's 100%, this is like you ever run a high pressure hydro blaster on your walkway? This is the same thing, they're blowing it on with high pressure water. They use them between 6.6 and 2.5 billion gallons to lay that cable. They can go about 656 feet per minute. Total jetting can run between 3 and 12,000 gallons per minute of water, and anything that's picked up in that water is dead. Come on, I mean, we stopped doing this. The cooling method on the DC that Jerry talked about, you can't do that. That's illegal to have a land-based power plant today with open cooling like that. They could do air-cooled, but you saw on their substation, they actually had a big heliport. So they'd rather take the area up for heliport. The guy told me, well, it's too much weight and it's too much money. It's too much weight and it's too much money to do it right. Because if you're gonna do it right. They don't even wanna do that because it costs them money. Why are they allowed? There's no, I keep asking, where are your restrictions? Why are you allowing them to lay cable 24/7 through 11-foot tide? That's like a volcano going off and the ash bearing everything. Is exactly what's going to happen. So if you look at that new transmission line, they're cutting in up through the Cape, through Barnstable, is that right?
Yeah.
Look at that, look where they're clearing. They did it up in Maine. They took a pristine forest, flattened it, and that's going to help lower the carbon, right? Come on. It's all about money. I worked for them for a lot of years. It's all about money. Oops, sorry. And then 6% of these, you're going to have to lay concrete mats. Well, where do you think the lobsters go to hide? And what do you think this is going to look like in 6 months? It's going to be covered with barnacles and mussels and lobster hiding and high EMF levels just to put it off. So they're going to be, you're creating a sanctuary for your marine life that's going to be EMF'd. This is hard to see, I'll apologize, but basically this is what Jerry said about daisy chaining. These are about 12 megawatts, and I deciphered it over here. The cables are between 4 inches and 15. A lot of them today run 10 different wind turbines tied together, daisy chained together, going to a switch yard, going to an export cable to shore. So depending upon how the voltage of your wind turbine, the power megawatts, it's either 12 or 15. They're having all kinds of problems with these big machines now. The 15 megawatt machines, 14 megawatt machines are falling down structurally. Just too much weight that high up. But anyways, I digress. This is a really simple layout. This is one in Europe. So if you take that and you look at these high voltage inter-array, that cable picks up about all the way to 36 degrees. This is a European study. These are facts. Time it gets to that 10th wind turbine, that cable is up 36 degrees. So now you got a 180 degree export cable with 36 degree rise on your inter-array. Miles and miles of radiant heat in your ocean. How is this help? I don't understand. Someone help me here. I just don't get it. So, more load, and here's another point that you really got to think about, is that these things are variable. So what you can't really establish anything around them because they're going to go from 0 to full load, back to half load, up to full load. So that temperature, what sea life likes is a flat, normal temperature, not a lot of quick rising. So no one knows what this is going to do. Electrical platforms, service platforms, these are switch yards, okay? And the one we looked at down here was, and there again I had to guess, they wouldn't tell me, was 220 kV jump or up to 345. I'm guessing it's going to stay around the 220 because the 345 transformer costs millions and millions. 185,000, almost 186,000 gallons of oil products. SF6 gas. SF6 has been around for a lot of years. I've commissioned 3 different power plants. So by the time you get your SF6 in, it always comes with a couple extra bottles because it leaks. And that is like, what, 10 times worse than CO2 as far as degrading the atmosphere? And the big point that no one talks about is on the operation side, right? Transformer noise. You all came here in trucks and cars and they all, if you go out and start each vehicle out there and you put your hand on them, I don't care if they're all Ford F-150s, they're gonna have a little different vibration, right? Somebody's got 150,000 on their truck and I got 20 on mine, they'll have different vibrations when they're operating. All this vibration and noise is in the cables, it's in all the transformers out there, it's in all the wind turbines. What do you think that's gonna do to a silent ocean? All of a sudden you're putting all this noise in. Noise pollution. Wow. So I'm gonna apologize, it's a little blurry, but this is the best one I could get out there. But here's your central transformer, and that's running almost 59,000 gallons of oil.
Did you put that in focus?
I can't, I think it's the screen. You wanna try it? I don't think it's gonna get any better.
Yeah, no, it's like better.
But so each of those daisy chains, try that, right there, right there. Right there's a little better. These are all breakers, right? So all where I showed you where the 10 and daisy chain together, they all have an individual breaker, and they have a breaker for all 10. That one breaker ties onto a big bus bar, which ties to your transformer. And that's stepping it up. So the higher the voltage, the less line loss. So all these breakers will go to this on a big bus bar, to one here, and to an export cable. You have battery backup, and you have diesel generator backup. So if the cable goes down, which is 25% of the time cable failure, the other 25% is fires, which they have no fire suppression. I don't know why. I guess it's to keep the cost down. So it's the same thing you'll see in a power plant, right? You get your daisy chain coming into a breaker, ties to a bus bar, ties to a transformer, goes off, goes back to shore. I apologize for it's not real clear. But every one of these systems, each one of these big projects will have their own diesel generator offshore. They have to. This one's running about almost 7,000 gallons of diesel in storage and a day tank about 2,000. So about 9,000 gallons of diesel offshore, plus your other 185,000 gallons of various oils and greases. And this thing's floating. The lady that's running Maine's offshore wind project admitted to me, she said, we don't know how we're going to do this. How are we going to tie in all these daisy chains of 10 machines and everything's moving? How are you going to anchor this and have 10, 15 different lines coming in for these breakers to go offshore? They don't know. This is not ready for prime time yet, but they're going to do it anyways. Every engine works off a power curve, right? So those of you that don't know, this is in meters per second. So basically, around 9 miles an hour, they start generating. They also use their own energy, parasitic load, to start spinning the turbine blades, just like a turning gear. Every big machine has a turning gear. They use power to heat the blades, they use power to heat the cubicles. But here, this is how absurd it is. So at 9 miles an hour we start. At about 25 miles an hour we're at full load. And at 50, 55 miles an hour we shut down because it will tear it apart. It's too much wind. What happens is that nor'easter, when I showed you during the winter time, is zero out. The wind's blowing 50 miles an hour. That's not unheard of. We've seen 2 storms this winter, right? And we have no solar because there's no sun, we have no batteries, and we have no wind. This is a system that needs 100% backup 100% of the time. So what are we doing this for? Why are we building something that needs 100% backup, something that's going to destabilize the grid? So let's just say the wind's blowing 10 to 25 miles an hour and gusts to 30. So you're going to go from half load, so let's say this is 1,000 megawatts, we're going to go from 500 megawatts to 1,000 megawatts. We could do it almost, you know how fast the wind cranks up, right? You've got to have a gas turbine going exactly opposite all the time, or batteries, or capacity. Well, batteries are going to last you 4 hours, then you're out of luck, right? And the rest of the time, you're going to have fast-moving gas turbines. And we don't want those to run. This is what they're telling me. So what the hell are you going to use? Is this making any sense to anybody?
No.
It's just, So this is the power curve. This is all of them about the same. Okay, your cut-in speed and your cut-out speed and your full load will vary a little bit, but this is what you're dealing with. That's what variable power is. So if you're running 10-mile-an-hour wind at half load, I got 500 megawatts. 30 seconds later, I'm giving 1,000 megawatts. Them gas turbines don't move that quick. I mean, you can do 50, 60 megawatts a minute. So you're going to have a lot of gas turbines moving up and down to cover this. I'm going to tell you right now, if this goes ahead, you're going to have some blackouts. So this is a really simple. You got your wind, you got your gearbox, you got your generator, which ties. Each one of these has a transformer and a disconnect switch, and it drops out to a switchyard, right? So this is this is a land base, but they're all the same. Each one of these will have about 3,000 gallons of oil, have a transformer in it, because they all got to step it up to the same voltage, right? So the array will be the same voltage, then you step it up higher, you go to shore, because the higher the voltage, the less line loss. Line loss is nothing but friction. Electricity running through a line, basically AC runs through the outside of your conductor. That's why you have a lot of multi-strand conductors. It mostly runs around the outside, where DC will run through the whole damn conductor. But at the end of the day, you've got 3,000 gallons, you've got a disconnect, and when I see a fire, I'm thinking there's 3,000 gallons at least down below there, right? And in closing here, this is really what's going on. This is right from the government. EIA is a government report. This is based from 2000 when this really started getting crazy. Look at coal, okay? The idea is to shut down the old coal plants that have paid off. And there's 600 or 700 years of coal in the ground in the United States alone. There's going to be a way to burn this. Coal gasification, there's going to come a technology. Same thing that happened when they had the power purchase agreements up in New England, up in Maine early on in 2000. Well, we got to do something. We got to do something. It's shovel ready. Well, you're seeing it again. We're reinventing the wheel. What happened in Maine was we went about 10 years, gas came in, the price of power plummeted. We couldn't afford this power. We had to pay it off. So it took us another 10 or 15 years to pay off the power purchase agreement. And then the price of power started dropping down, and now we're doing it again with wind. That worked so well the first time. But what's happened here, statistically, coal, the old style coal has really dropped out. Our emissions are down 35–40% just in power generation. But you look at this line, this is gas-fired generation. This is renewables coming up. You see the resemblance? They have to mirror each other. The gas, no matter what they're saying, gas turbines and gas generation is what you need to go, at least until we have another form of energy. I don't care if it's fusion, coal gasification, it's all based on deregulation, is based on price. So you're going to have something come in that's going to be a low-cost provider, coal fusion, I don't know, but it's going to happen again, and we're all going to be hooked in at $150 megawatts. You're going to have to buy it out again. Well, when that all happens, just think of this conversation. This crazy guy from Maine told you about this, and I'll come back and say I told you so. Thank you.